Hey, Molly.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Anything else we need to prep on here? Or are we feeling good?
Nope, we're feeling good. I'm getting this set up.
Cool.
It says we're not live until I click go live.
Yep.
I'm just setting this up.
Cool.
It says we're not live until
Good morning. How are you?
Hey, David. Good to see you.
Thank you. Same here.
Yeah. We will have people starting to join here in a few minutes.
Okay. It's a great topic. Very timely for me also. So thank you.
Good. No worries. You're going to love Ryan. Hey, Ryan. There he is.
Hey, how are you, Jason?
Doing well.
Good. Matt will be joining in just a second. We're on a call together talking about contracts.
Love that.
Yeah.
So we'll let people trickle in until about a minute past. Then we'll push to LinkedIn Live.
Okay.
People that will come in through LinkedIn. Go from there.
Okay.
Hey, Matt.
Jason,
Good morning.
good morning. How are you?
Doing well. So I was just telling Rylan we're gonna probably just stay on mute until about 1 or 2 minutes past, and then we'll push to LinkedIn Live, get some more people who come in there.
Okay.
I'm gonna do like just a few slides background, super quick, and then kick it over to you.
Okay.
With the first question, and then I'll shepherd you through.
Perfect.
Cool. That'd be fun.
Awesome.
Did we get any more registrants after the push yesterday?
Yeah, I think we're at about 30.
Oh, all right. That's great.
And
Better than 16.
indeed, twice as good, roughly.
Rylan. My name is David. I have never heard the name Rylan before, and yet my son last week had a baby boy and named him Rylan.
There you go. Yep. There weren't really any Rylans for many years, and then I finally started meeting some, and then I actually met someone from a different state who was from Cincinnati who'd seen me play basketball in high school and named their son Rylan because they saw me play basketball and liked my name. It was
Oh, funny.
totally random, yeah.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
That's funny. That's a good story.
Trendsetter. I like it. Doing a quick screen check here. How's this look, everyone? Yeah, full screen.
Looks good.
I think we're going live on LinkedIn. Should have some more people jumping in here soon. So we'll get started about 2 or 3 minutes past the top of the hour. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started here as more people trickle into the room. By way of introduction, I'm Jason Bolt, Chief Growth Officer here at Vecteris. I'm super excited to have Matt Strippelhoff and Rylan Peters, CEO and CRO, respectively, of Redhawk Technologies. They're amazing people, partners of Vecteris, and just general all-around good leaders. So I'm really happy to have them here so they can share their wisdom about how B2B services companies should be thinking about working with outside developers. So this session is a part of our ongoing series called the Vecteris Expert Series, where we bring in amazing experts like Matt and Rylan to talk about just different trends and technical aspects that are affecting the B2B professional services space, and in particular in productization. We have a couple upcoming series, 2 actually in May, coming up, one on how to create the legal structures that will protect your intellectual property as you productize. So a very important topic. And we're also going to be touching on how you can be tapping into financing sources like corporate venture capital to secure funding for your solution, to give you a little perspective on what's coming down the pike. But today we're talking about how organizations should be working with outside developers, some of the things to watch out for, and what I hope is going to be super practical advice for everyone. As with all these sessions, put Q&A in the chat. We're going to have a smaller room today, so I actually encourage people to come off of mute, have conversations. Let's make this a dialogue. Matt and Rylan are super conversational and really want to dive into whatever you want to talk about. But I guess to put this into context a little bit, Vecteris works with B2B services organizations who are doing something that we call productization, which is what you see on the page. And software, as Matt and Ryan will talk about, plays a pretty big role in almost every single one of these steps. Whether you are moving from the orange to the light blue box here at the bottom, where you're using software to standardize and optimize the way that you sell and deliver your services, all the way to the upper right, where we're actually commercializing a software capability that you want to sell as a product within the organization. So this is our backdrop on common objectives of most people who are going to be in the room today. So Matt and Rylan, I'm going to take off share here so that we can see our faces for the majority of this conversation. So I'd love for you to start there, just as your experience, either working with B2B services organizations or just companies in general who are thinking about developing custom software applications. Why do they do this? And sort of how do they get to that path?
Yeah, so generally speaking, it's considered best practice to find what you need in a commercial off-the-shelf software solution if you can, right? So most companies will start their journey there. They'll generally find a really good CRM solution and maybe ERP solution, things like that, to help the operations of the business run smoothly. And that's always the better path. Don't start with custom. Custom applications are generally invested in order to create some competitive advantage or differentiator. There's got to be a real value behind it. It's not easy to do, and there's a cost of ownership that comes into play as well, because once you build it, you need to properly support and maintain it, keep it secure, keep the code updated, et cetera. So the why that we generally see is to move the dial on revenue, and that might be through significant increase in productivity because they reduce a lot of manual work in their workflows by automating things through some custom software, and or they might be creating some brand new revenue streams. We're seeing a lot more and more of that, especially as these professional service companies look to productize in some way and move to more of a recurring revenue approach. That's generally what we're seeing out there. Ryan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would agree. I think I always tend to put the custom solutions as the closer you get to the experience of our B2B clients themselves, that's when things become more custom. And as Matt said, like, I think about it in two ways. You're either generating revenue through a custom solution, or you're creating internal operating efficiencies to cut down on OpEx. So those are generally where off the shelf solutions, out of the box solutions aren't going to work as well. And that's where we tend to play. So
that's great. And so I'm sure in a lot of your conversations, when you start talking about software development, you run into a lot of assumptions or misconceptions that executives, especially if they come from an environment where they're not used to building software, that you might run into. So how do you address, what are some of those? How do you address them? Sort of what do those initial conversations look like for you?
Yeah, so I think to kind of frame this up, groups or leaders maybe that have never been involved in a custom software engineering effort, generally the misconceptions around there is that they see it, features that they want to include in whatever that solution is, and other applications that they use on a regular basis, and they just assume because those features are present in other systems that they must be easy to develop. So I think a misconception is that it's easy, and it's really not. Now, more experienced individuals who have been involved in projects, they generally their misconceptions are not around easy. They know it's not easy. Sometimes it might be more around it's going to be worth it without taking the time to evaluate what the return on the investment might be. So sometimes they think if the investment falls within a specific threshold, maybe they'll go ahead and pull the trigger, but they might not actually be taking the time to evaluate what it's really going to do for the business.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely the biggest that I would see too, is like the thinking about it as an investment and an asset that you're creating, because it is something that's custom that you're building from scratch. And so the first questions I tend to ask are, what is this creating? Like, what revenue is this creating? How much money is it going to save? If not, we have templates and models we can use to do that, to calculate that, because we know that if we build something for a client and it doesn't have the intended outcome, then it's not going to be a successful project or a successful relationship. So that's kind of the upfront thing is, okay, what are you trying to do? If you looked at market size, if you looked at what revenue potential this is going to create, because we do, just like any other investment, you want to calculate what returns are going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think implicit maybe in some of those comments relates back to the ladder that I showed around the different ways that software might be plugged into a B2B professional services environment. So one of those things would be using software to facilitate the delivery of services and increasing effectiveness there. And then the latter would be probably what you were just talking about, Rylan, around actually selling a product, a software product to generate revenue. So for firms that are thinking about using an outside developer, like how do those processes different? Like what are some of the things to know and think about if you're developing software for internal use versus something that you're going to commercialize?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes groups will start with internal for obvious reasons. They're going to solve a problem. Their assumption is that problem exists and it's pervasive throughout the industry that they're in. And that gives them some thoughts of commercialization, right? Wow, we really did something interesting here. We've got this really powerful custom solution that's working for us. Maybe they're a lot more profitable as a result. Maybe they have a lower head count and they can do more work, right? It all comes down to how it's impacting the bottom line. And that'll generally spark ideas about commercializing. Now, what we found over the past few years is that oftentimes there's bias in the way that a professional service company operates, because there's so many different ways to do things. And in a professional services environment, the way that you do things is really the way that your company does them. It's not always the same process for other companies in the same industry. So there can be some bias built into those custom solutions that you have to kind of figure out how to unpack during that commercialization journey, right? How do you go and ask questions of the market, get very transparent feedback, and figure out what needs to change in that application to serve 80% of the audience you're trying to reach, and don't worry about the 20%, right? It's that whole 80-20 rule when you're trying to create a commercial product. So I think that's an interesting step in that journey. And it requires a lot of careful consideration and process. You can't just go into it assuming that, hey, it works great for us, everybody's going to want it.
Yeah, there's a lot of validation has to happen outside your own walls, and there's a certain amount of polish and considerations for commercialization that people often don't think about. And there's a lot, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to market. How are we going to reach our audience? How are we going to test our, how are we going to test our thoughts on features and outcomes that we want? How are we going to collect payment? There's a lot that goes into that internal systems or internal applications that are really great for an internal company environment may not be great for commercialization. You have to validate a lot of ideas, I think, before you take that approach, because the investment obviously increases when you're talking about go to market. So those are the big things I think that we're pretty good at, just because we've seen hiccups along the way, and we've worked with lots of companies that have built internal products or platforms that they're thinking about taking to market, or they're building stuff from scratch that they want to take to market. So yeah, it's a fun journey, but it can be painful if you don't follow a certain path.
Yeah. Yeah, almost the differentiation and service delivery you were talking about at the beginning almost becomes a double-edged sword. Like, it works for you, it's what you build your company around, but is it actually something that the market wants to take on broadly, and can other organizations use it? So I can imagine that can be a difficult one to traverse. And Shahid had a really good question actually related to this, asking about kind of templates around when you're at the beginning of the project, like how do you evaluate evaluate value versus return relative to the investment that you're putting into it right at the beginning stage. Maybe get into the mental model and maybe some of the tools that you use to help companies do that.
Yeah, we've got two that we use fairly frequently. One is a tech innovation workshop, and we have a do-it-yourself version. So if anybody participating today would like a copy of that, I can send that out to you. Just let us know. And if we're in early conversations and it's pretty clear to us that maybe the stakeholder, the champion of the idea, isn't quite articulating the value prop very well, or maybe they're not quite clear what the value proposition is, then we would generally offer that tech innovation workshop as a way to gain some clarity around what that solution may do for the business and get to a clear value prop. And if they have a pretty good idea of what the value proposition is, and let's just assume it's going to be streamlining operations, and they're going to see a significant improvement in terms of how quickly they turn things around, maybe a reduction in errors because we're automating a lot of manual process. Then we have another utility that we can provide, and we often use this as well, and it's an efficiency gain calculator. I mean, it's not very sexy, but it's a great way to take the time, go through the due diligence, and say, here's how we do it today. Here's the person doing that work, right? Here's their salary where they are, and multiply salary by 1.25, right? Here's your cost per hour, and then this is how much that process costs the business. And then you compare that by going through and say, it's based on a set of assumptions. If we automate this process, and maybe it's through RPA or some custom application or an integration, what's the reduction in effort, right? And then based on that calculation of manual labor, you can very quickly see what the return on investment is going to be each time that you go through that process. And so it's a great way to kind of actually calculate and demonstrate to other stakeholders what the value is going to be to the business, right? And we've seen some pretty staggering numbers, right? When you go through that process, it's a little bit tedious, but it's very helpful. But we do think it's super critical to clarify what the value proposition is and determine, just as importantly, how are you going to measure the impact once you've got the solution in play?
Yep. So I imagine clicking it up a little bit as well. There are different paths to getting the software. You can have your own developers build it. You could create a new team. You could hire someone like Redhawk or another outside developer. Can you outline sort of what, I guess, the span of those options are and why companies who are on the line today may want to consider different paths?
Sure. Yeah. Rylan, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, I think obviously there's a lot of different ways you can approach managing and building technology, right? And so if you're an enterprise, you have big budget. In Cincinnati, we know the big players, the Krogers of the world, the Fifth Thirds of the world, and those kind of folks. They have big multi-million-dollar budgets. They have a lot of internal staff. And for them, once they have very defined tasks, very defined projects in a sense, they're using offshore resources, they're using stateside teams, consultants. I would say for them, where you see things go sideways, and I've lived in both worlds, where at Redhawk we are serving mid-market clients, and I'll talk about that in a second. But in the enterprise world, if they don't very closely monitor offshore teams, they can run into a lot of problems, and that's because if you're building something from scratch, the communication barrier, the time barrier, and the ability to translate what needs to be done on a daily level, weekly level, and what what you're trying to actually execute can get offline very quickly. So from a cost savings, there has to be a lot of management and a lot of oversight into those offshore teams. I haven't seen a lot of those go well, I'm not going to lie, but some can if they're managed with a really good product manager stateside, and the communication has to be top notch. Mm-hmm. For smaller organizations, and I say some smaller, call it $2 billion in revenue, $1 billion in revenue or smaller, the biggest hurdle they run to with hiring internal staff is that they hire staff with a specific purpose, but then the purpose changes and the technologies change. And there's a lot of varied technologies that end up across the spectrum for them. And so they always are looking for, okay, now we need design, now we need front end development, now we need someone to work in the cloud environment. And so the staff that they have may not be the staff that they need in the future, or they may have holes, right? And that's where consulting or firms like Redhawk could come in and say, okay, we can do your support and maintenance. We can help you build new things if that's where you need expertise. We can help with certain work, and we can help you maintain that and understand best practices, right? And I would say the cost of hiring engineering, if you haven't done it lately, if you're trying to hire a staff of 3 with health insurance and everything involved, right? Like, what does that look like for a smaller firm, even let's say 100, let's say you're a $50 million firm. If you're trying to build an engineering team from scratch and you're hiring 3, 4, 5, somebody to lead them, it can get very costly. And so I think the way to look at that is how do you basically accomplish the things you want at a cost that's manageable, and always have experts kind of on hand to accomplish what needs to be done next. So, I definitely think, just like most things, I'm a financial person. I look at it on paper and say, okay, if we're going to build this, or are we going to outsource it? What does it look like? And for a lot of firms, that's where we try to play, right? It's like, okay, if you don't have an engineering firm, or you have a small engineering team in-house, that's where we would step in and fill the gaps and be an ongoing support maintenance group, build things, be there as experts for your internal team as well. So yeah, it's a math problem for, that's how I look at it. So
Yeah, I would add that there's a lot of standard operating procedures that are really important for a DevOps team to be effective and efficient. So it's another consideration. And sometimes it does make sense for a company to build their own software engineering practice within their 4 walls. And if that's the case, then you're going to need some fairly senior and experienced leadership that can build that organization within your business, because it's not individuals sitting in seats that are producing these applications. It's a team effort, and you have to have the proper routines in place so that you're ensuring things like proper maintenance of the software bill of materials and scanning that software bill of materials for emerging vulnerabilities, that it's code remediation efforts, tech debt remediation. That's part of the practice, and it's easy for smaller organizations to just not have sight of that if it's not their core business. So in situations where I think it does make sense to start building that engineering team, it's further down on that journey of productization. If that custom business application really becomes the core of the business, then it probably makes sense to build that team as part of your company for very various reasons. But that's generally further downstream in that journey. You can start with outsourcing the development work. You mature the business to get to a certain point where you're ready to start building that DevOps and product management team in-house, because now you're a product company.
Yeah.
That's further down in the journey.
Yeah. So it sounds like if you want to go fast, thinking with Rylan's hat of cost effectiveness and speed, thinking about outside expertise is probably the best way to go faster, and then maybe focusing some of your efforts more on the go-to-market, right? Of like validating the size of the opportunity and the value proposition, and then as you have success, releasing larger and larger investments over time.
Yeah.
Got it.
Just to add to that, I know Matt and I and Redhawk, we've acted as that product team, and as a firm goes to market, we help them think about what kind of people they would want for the long run to support the product, the proprietary knowledge of the product, and then we scale out of the business through time. We're doing that with a client right now. We help them build and get to market quickly, and then we're helping them, transition that to their own employees, new engineers and things like that. So
Yep, that makes sense. I want to click back up a little bit on the custom versus off-the-shelf types of environment. And so as you think about the productization journey, where do you see those two things intersecting when you're making some kind of a choice about the architecture and selection? Are there kind of common patterns that you see from customers different parts of that journey?
It's a great question. I think generally what we're seeing is, and Rylan touched on it, the closer you get to the end customer's user experience, the more likely you're going to identify opportunity for a custom software application or solution. And so as far as the commercial off-the-shelf solution versus custom, it's generally not either or, right? What we're typically seeing is that there's a lot of dependency on CRM and ERP solutions behind the scenes, or middleware that integrates those systems. So when we're developing things like a custom field service application, right? I'm thinking about an example right now. It's a client of ours that's in the oil and gas industry, and they have a lot of field workers out there that are out for days at a time on site, forerunners, et cetera, and they're out inspecting pipelines. Well, they need a very specific type of application for their internal use, but they're owned by a PE group, right? So they have other companies in our portfolio that can also benefit. So it's sort of an interesting commercialization play, right? They're investing in it as a group. Multiple companies benefit. They may or may not commercialize a product beyond that point. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of integration with this mobile app that with their ERP accounting systems and CRM, et cetera. Security, like Active Directory, Microsoft AD, I think is what we're using for security on there, so that they can validate during login, et cetera. So they can't find what they need off the shelf for that field service application because it's so specialized.
Mm-hmm.
And they did start by shopping for off-the-shelf solutions. And the features were significantly limited, and there was no path to customization available for them to modify that commercial solution to suit their needs. And the price point was prohibitive because they'll have upwards of 5,000 users. And the commercial solutions that were available to them were priced based on a per seat, right? Mm-hmm. So PE, right? So they're very business oriented, financial oriented. They're doing things like Rylan would do from a financial perspective. They're putting the plan together on paper and seeing what does it look like if we go with this off-the-shelf solution. Well, it's going to prove to be cost prohibitive because it's 6 figures a year, and they don't own the core tech, and they don't have any control over how that product might evolve in the future. And they also didn't have the ability to customize the product to suit their specific niche needs, right? So that led them down the path of, well, we've got to find somebody that can develop this custom application for us and integrate with our backend systems, and that's what led them to find Redhawk, which it's a lot of fun. I wish I could tell you more about the specifics around that application, but we can't because we have NDAs in place. But those are the types of things that we see.
Yeah, super helpful. I'm sure you've seen your fair share of initiatives that didn't go as planned. Like, what are some of the common mistakes that you see when companies are investing in a custom application? And then maybe talk about the flip side of that as well. Like, what are some of the things that, if you had to kind of tell the audience, like, focus on these two things that define a really successful project, take us through the barbell of those things.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about this concept of minimally viable product. Mm. We hear that a lot in the industry. If you do it well, you can gain a lot of clarity and insight around, from releasing an MVP. But a big pitfall that a lot of companies run into, and we've experienced this ourselves, right? We've had some projects get a little crazy. The effort starts out focused on an MVP, and then it starts to evolve during the software development lifecycle, and it becomes more and more complex. And before you know it, you're not producing an MVP anymore. Now you're producing a full-on commercial solution because the business need is not aligned with the MVP. The business need is really what they envisioned in the first place, And so even though you put together this plan as a group collectively, you say, well, here's the MVP, we're going to start with this, with the understanding that a good portion of the code might need to be rewritten or replaced, or maybe the backend infrastructure isn't suitable for the commercial solution. But the MVP is meant to be an opportunity for us to learn and get something out very quickly to learn from. It's difficult sometimes to keep all of the stakeholders aligned and focused on the fact that it's an MVP, because the business need is still for that commercial solution. And so as the project progresses, it's kind of like the old adage of the frog in a pot of hot water, and the temperature keeps rising and rising and rising. Mm-hmm. That evolution of going from MVP to commercialized solution can happen in small increments. A request here, a request there, feature enhancement here, and you just keep going. It's hard to manage that well. It works great. It's a great concept, but it can quickly get out of hand if you're not careful.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great point. And somebody, Shahid in the comments wrote, MVP is easy to start, but hard to scope manage. Yeah, that's seen that a lot. I would say like a couple things. Clearly defined scope, like clearly defined scope for the work that's to be done is vital importance to keeping the project and budget on track. And understanding what business outcomes from the beginning are we trying to meet, because we're doing the work to create business value. And if that's clearly defined and the scope is clearly defined and everyone's in agreement on what success looks like, the projects and I don't like to use the word projects and it's ongoing, but the work tends to go really well. If it's not, and if there's not a shared understanding of what success and what the scope should be, it can get messy. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rylan. And from a very tactical level or practical level, a way to think about managing scope is measuring a feature request against the intended business outcome, right? Because you're going to get requests throughout the software development lifecycle. They're going to see, the stakeholders are going to see the feature that you originally planned, and they're going to say, wow, it'd be great if. Well, the wow, great if, well, who's that really going to benefit? And is there enough benefit to warrant investing in that enhancement of that feature or creating a new feature? Is it really going to deliver on the business outcome? And if the answer is no, then we would recommend putting it into the wish list. It's not that it's a bad idea. And the people that we're working with need to recognize that we're capturing everything along the way so that we can revisit that. But that's a way to carefully manage scope as the effort is progressing. So you got to really manage that, because just because one individual says, or silent, or vocal minority in the group, right, might say, I really want that. Okay, well, it's easy if during the outsourcing process for the vendor to feel like they're in a position of service, right? They're a service organization. Mm-hmm. But whose responsibility is it to determine if that feature should be invested in or not? And if the client doesn't have strong product ownership or taking the time to question those types of requests before having the vendor deliver on development of that feature, you could very quickly start making some investments that might not pay off.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, she had a comment here about having a product owner internally to help manage scope. That I think is spot on. And what are other maybe roles or stakeholders that you'll see within a services business that should be involved in this process?
Oh, deep subject matter experts, right? So if we're developing something to automate a workflow, and I'm thinking about a client now, I won't go into detail, but we were probably 90 days in before we met this individual. We didn't know that they were part of the team, but they had much deeper knowledge and understanding of the way that they handle certain aspects of financial reporting that other stakeholders that we thought were really the subject matter experts, they didn't have the same level of understanding or deep knowledge. And so once we had that individual as part of the client team, man, did we get some clarity. So I think it's important, to identify who your true subject matter experts are. And they might be people pretty deep down in the trenches doing the work on a day-to-day basis that you're trying to automate. make sure that they're actively involved in the project early and often. Other types of roles, really it's and our clients might not always use the term product owner, but we really do need that product owner. There's technical roles involved, so these would be individuals that have a deep understanding of existing solutions that maybe we need to integrate with. So those are often technical resources, and sometimes it's other third parties, right? If they're relying on a third parties for their CRM environment or their ERP, they may need to provide some technical expertise from their end that can provide the API endpoints that we may need to integrate with. Yeah, so the team can be fairly broad. It can involve multiple vendors at times.
Yeah, it can be broad. And my advice for if you're a mid-market company and you're not a technology organization in a sense, and you do not have engineers, and you are building something from scratch or something internal, hire a product person, product manager that we can interface with as a group. It's gonna benefit the success of the project, the success of the product that you're building, the ongoing success of the business value. A lot of times the way we operate is we always have a project manager who's a very product minded person on our side, but the product owner, the product manager for an organization should live on their side of the fence. In my view, they're going to own that. They're going to own the outcome for the client. And it just makes the projects and the work and the ongoing relationship so much smoother. The outcomes are so much better. That's one thing that I've noticed, and we have lots of clients and a lot of historical clients, and whenever I see that and they have someone who's product minded on the other side who can manage that, that makes me smile. So
Yeah, cool, that's great. I've only got one other question that's come in, I guess, through the chat to me, which is, what are you seeing with generative AI and like its role in custom software development? Just as you have conversations, and then after we answer that one, if anyone wants to come off of mute and ask a question or put it in chat, we can kind of just keep it open to the group from there.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot, as I think you guys would expect when it comes to AI in general. Generative AI, there's a lot of promise there. When we're using tools for software composition analysis to identify emerging, common vulnerability exposures in the tech stack, and hopefully I'm not using too many technical terms here for the audience, but if I am, feel free to ask me to clarify some of this. But some of these products out there for software composition analysis are providing generative AI to provide direction to and recommend code changes to remediate technical debt. Sometimes it's as simple as the system recognizing that this particular package used in that software bill of materials is no longer supported. The next safest version is this version, and then it actually will provide code to help you implement that. We came across a product recently that promises to go ahead and just automate remediation. I have a great deal of fear and trepidation around that, because unless you have true automated end-to-end regression testing, I don't know that I would want an AI tool modifying code base. And then we're using tools at Redhawk like Copilot, GitHub, and things like that to speed up development. There's a lot of noise out there, or I don't know, what's the word, how would I describe it? There's a lot of tools promising to automate the creation of apps. Mm-hmm. We're not seeing them actually work. So, we're cautious. It's not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think it seems like there's the efficiencies it brings can be incredible, but there's still a lot to be done. And Matt's right. Like, we use it for code commenting. Really, it's automation of a lot of these tasks that are very manual and very error prone. So,
yeah. We see more opportunity, more practical application of AI when it comes to things like intelligent search. So prompt-based AI experiences, which we're all fairly familiar with at this point in time. We actually have that available in our software control tower where we handle software composition analysis now. It's a new feature available through the platform that we're using, and you can have a conversation with this not generative AI. It's more like intelligent search is what I would use, because it's generating responses based on the data that it has. So in that regard, it's generative, but it's not creating things like images and code and, but you can have a conversation with this AI tool about the health and wellness of your custom business application in our software control tower. It's pretty interesting. They just released it.
Yeah. Cool. We are open for Q&A for anyone who wants to either come off mute, ask a question, put something in the Q&A. And Molly, I don't know if we can check on LinkedIn as well if there are comments or questions there. We can bring those people in. All right, I'm hearing nothing on LinkedIn. This has been an amazing 40 minutes. Where can people find you to learn more about Redhawk, get more educated on outside software development beyond what you've shared today? What would you like to leave the group with?
Yeah, you guys can just find us through our website, redhawk-tech.com. Feel free to reach out if there's anything that you'd like to see from us. We can share the do-it-yourself tech innovation workshop as a takeaway. I'm happy to send out the ROI calculator based on automating workflows. That's a pretty handy tool that a lot of folks we work with have got some value from. So, and just general Q&A, if you'd like to kind of know how we're doing things like software composition analysis, and really, yeah, just reach out to us through our website.
Thank you both for taking the time today. It's been super insightful, a lot of fun. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's fun. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
See everyone.
All right. See you.
Thank you.